Have you ever wondered what truly lies behind the smile of one of the world's most desired men? That gleam in his eyes, promising a world of fantasy, yachts, and exclusive parties, might just be the gateway to a carefully constructed psychological labyrinth. Here at The Truth, Dark Psychology, we don't settle for the surface. We dive deep into the minds of those who have mastered the art of influence. The story we are about to unravel today isn't about an actor, but about an archetype of a seducer and the disturbing pattern that seems to follow him. If you're ready to look behind the curtain of glamour, subscribe, like the video, and prepare to question everything you thought you knew about power and romance. Leonardo DiCaprio's public persona is a masterpiece of impression management. He is not just a talented actor. He is the tortured artist, the passionate environmental activist, the man who uses his platform for causes greater than himself. This image creates a powerful halo effect, where his positive qualities in one area spill over into the perception of his character as a whole. Psychologically, this disarms criticism. Questioning his romantic patterns almost sounds like heresy, a futility in the face of his apparent nobility. It is a charismatic armor that makes him virtually immune to judgment, allowing his more questionable behaviors to operate under a veil of admiration and respect. This construction is not accidental. It's the result of decades of a meticulously managed career. By aligning himself with prestigious directors and global causes, he has elevated himself above the status of a mere Hollywood heartthrob to become a cultural icon. This position of moral and artistic superiority establishes an instant power dynamic in any relationship. The partner is not just dating a man, but an ideal, a living myth. This perception creates a psychological barrier that prevents the partner from seeing herself as an equal, facilitating an imbalance where her needs and identity can be sublimated in favor of maintaining proximity to greatness within this fortress of image. Any problematic behavior can be rationalized or ignored. The narrative surrounding him is so strong that it overshadows patterns that, in any other context, would be seen as red flags. People, including his partners, may be led to believe that the normal rules of a relationship do not apply to a genius or a global icon. This perceived exceptionalism is a tool of passive control, where the celebrity's own status dictates the terms of the relationship, often non-verbally, creating an environment where questioning is discouraged and conformity is rewarded with continued access to his extraordinary world. The charisma he exudes is therefore a double-edged sword. On one hand, it inspires millions around the world to care about the planet and appreciate the art of cinema. On the other, this same charisma can function as a defense mechanism, a force field that deflects attention from behavioral patterns, suggesting a deep need for control and a possible aversion to true intimacy and equality in a relationship. The duality of the idol, the public face that inspires and the private shadow that can subtly manipulate and dominate those who get too close to the sun. Exploring this duality is fundamental to understanding the dark psychology at play. It's not about demonizing the public figure, but about analyzing the strategies, conscious or not, that are employed to maintain power. The DiCaprio myth teaches us that the most effective form of control is not brute force, but the creation of a narrative so compelling and admirable that the other person feels privileged to be a part of it, even if the role assigned to them is temporary and limited, serving more to reinforce the myth than to build a genuine partnership. The most discussed and revealing pattern associated with Leonardo DiCaprio is, without a doubt, his apparent inability to maintain a relationship with women over the age of 25. Superficially, this is dismissed as a simple preference for youth and beauty. However, from a dark psychology perspective, this pattern suggests something much deeper, an unconscious strategy to maintain absolute control and avoid vulnerability. A partner in her early 20s, often at the peak of her physical beauty, but still developing her identity, career, and self-confidence, represents an inherent power imbalance when compared to a global icon. Established for decades, this power dynamic is not trivial. A younger woman, still navigating the uncertainties of adult life, is psychologically more susceptible to the influence and leadership of an older, wealthier, and immensely more famous partner. The relationship does not start on a level playing field. He offers a world of experiences she likely couldn't access on her own, creating a sense of gratitude and indebtedness that can silence disagreement and self-assertion. Control doesn't need to be exerted explicitly. It's embedded in the very structure of the relationship, where one is the experienced guide and the other, the amazed apprentice. The age of 25 is symbolically significant. Neuroscientifically, it is around this age that the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for judgment, long-term planning, and self-awareness, reaches full maturity. A woman who passes this age begins to consolidate who she is, what she wants from life and a partner, and becomes more likely to demand equality, challenge power dynamics, and think about long-term commitments. The recurring termination of relationships around this mark suggests an aversion to this turning point, an escape from the moment the partner evolves from a malleable being into a fully realized equal. This pattern can be seen as a form of self-sabotage to avoid real intimacy. True intimacy requires vulnerability and the willingness to be seen and challenged by an equal. By ending relationships before this phase of mutual maturity can flourish, the seducer protects himself from being truly known and, consequently, from being potentially rejected or forced to confront his own flaws. It's a cycle of almost intimacy, where he enjoys the companionship and admiration, but retreats before the complexities and demands of an adult, equitable partnership set in. Therefore, the 25 pattern transcends mere physical preference. It can be interpreted as a psychological defense mechanism, a way to perpetuate a state of dominance and avoid the uncomfortable mirror that a mature, equal partner inevitably represents. It is the search for an echo, not a voice that can respond in kind. For the keen observer, this pattern is not about who he chooses, but about what he fears, the loss of control and the exposure that come with a love between two adults on equal footing. The beginning of a relationship with a figure like DiCaprio, as portrayed by the media, looks like a modern-day fairy tale. Sudden trips on private jets to exotic locations, access to ultra-exclusive events, expensive gifts, and intense focused attention. This whirlwind of romance is not just generosity. It perfectly mirrors the manipulation tactic known as love bombing. This technique involves overwhelming the target with demonstrations of affection, admiration, and adulation at the start of a relationship. The goal is to create an overwhelming emotional dependency and make the person feel they've found their soulmate, someone who understands them like no one else. Love bombing is effective because it exploits a fundamental human need to be seen, valued, and loved. When performed by someone with DiCaprio's status and resources, its effect is amplified 1,000-fold. It's not just a person giving you attention. It's a global icon choosing you, elevating you above all others. This experience is incredibly addictive and creates a relationship foundation that is both euphoric and dangerously unstable. The victim of love bombing is in a state of ecstasy, which lowers their defenses and makes them less likely to notice any subtle red flags. Psychologically, this initial phase of love bombing establishes a baseline of affection that becomes the reference for the rest of the relationship. Later, when the attention inevitably wanes, the partner is left in a state of confusion and self-blame, wondering what she did wrong to lose that initial level of passion. This puts her in a position of constantly seeking the partner's approval, desperately trying to recreate the magic of the early days. It's a subtle form of control that keeps the other person in a state of anxiety and Continuous effort. The grandeur of Hollywood-style love bombing also serves to obscure the lack of a genuine, deep connection. The excitement of trips, parties, and luxury can mask the absence of vulnerable conversations, shared fears, and the building of a solid foundation. The relationship becomes about the experiences, not the people. The partner falls in love with the fantasy, the lifestyle he provides, and that fantasy is controlled entirely by him. When he decides the fantasy is over, he withdraws not only his affection, but the entire world he created around her. Understanding love bombing is crucial to deciphering the dangerous seduction. It's a tactic that promises everything, but is designed to create a power imbalance from day one. The intensity is not a sign of true love, but a tool to create an emotional addiction, ensuring the partner becomes psychologically dependent on the seducer. It's the gilded trap. The victim feels like the luckiest person in the world, not realizing that the cage is being built around her, one golden bar at a time. Dating one of the most famous people on the planet might seem like the pinnacle of social life, but the reality is, paradoxically, a form of profound isolation. Life within the inner circle of a celebrity of DiCaprio's caliber is by necessity exclusive and closed off. The constant threat of paparazzi, the need for non-disclosure agreements, and a general mistrust of outsiders create an impenetrable bubble. For a new partner, being introduced to this world often means leaving behind her own support network, her friends, and her normal routine. This isolation doesn't have to be malicious or intentional to be effective as a tool of control. It is a natural consequence of the lifestyle. However, the psychological effect is the same. The partner becomes increasingly dependent on the star and his immediate circle for social interaction and validation. Her old friends may not understand her new reality, and the logistics of meeting them become complicated. Slowly, her world shrinks until he becomes the center of her social, emotional, and sometimes even financial universe. This dynamic creates fertile ground for manipulation. When a person is isolated from her external references and her reality anchors, friends and family who have known her since before the fame, her perception can be more easily shaped by her partner. Doubts about the relationship or feelings of unhappiness have nowhere to go except inward or back to the person who might be the source of the problem. This creates a cycle of dependency where the partner feels grateful for inclusion in the bubble, while at the same time feeling trapped within it. Life, inside this gilded cage, is filled with superficial stimuli that mask the emotional void. The parties, trips, and luxury serve as constant distractions, preventing the partner from confronting her loneliness and the loss of her own identity. She may begin to measure her worth through her proximity to fame and power rather than her own achievements and qualities. The isolation, therefore, is not just physical but also psychological, redefining the person's sense of self in relation to her famous partner. This process of subtle isolation is one of the most potent tactics in the dark psychology arsenal. It leaves no visible marks, involves no explicit aggression, yet it fundamentally restructures a person's reality, making them more compliant and controllable. The victim may not even realize she is being isolated. She might feel like she's living a dream, but a dream that depends entirely on another person can quickly turn into a nightmare when that person decides to wake her up mid-roll CTA. If this analysis is opening your eyes to the hidden dynamics behind power and seduction, take a quick break and hit that like button. Your subscription to The Truth, Dark Psychology helps us continue to bring these truths to light. And don't forget to leave a comment below suggesting which personality you'd like us to analyze next. Now let's get back to the anatomy of the discard. Just as important as how these relationships begin is how they end. In the observed patterns, the end is rarely dramatic or public. There are no major scandals or accusations. Instead, what we see is a silent discard. The partner, who until then was a constant presence by the star's side, simply disappears from the photos, the trips, his life. It is a sudden disappearance, often without clear closure, which, psychologically, can be devastating. This method of ending a relationship is a final demonstration of power and control. The silent discard, or ghosting in its most elevated form, leaves the other person in an emotional limbo. Without a final conversation, without a clear reason, she is left to fill in the blanks with self-blame and doubt. What did I do wrong? Why wasn't I enough? This technique avoids confrontation, emotional responsibility, and any need for vulnerability on the part of the person ending it. It is a way to close the chapter without having to face the emotional consequences of his actions, preserving his image as a calm man above the drama. This tactic is particularly cruel because it robs the person of the opportunity to process the breakup healthily. Grief becomes complicated by the lack of answers, leading to obsessive rumination about the final moments of the relationship in search of clues. From a dark psychology perspective, this keeps the discarded person psychologically attached to the seducer, even after the end. Confusion and the search for closure can haunt her for a long time, reinforcing the idea that he was an enigmatic and powerful figure whose approval she failed to maintain. The pattern of the discard, coinciding with the partner's 25th birthday, adds a layer of calculated coldness to the act. It suggests that the partner is not seen as a unique individual, but as an interchangeable part with an expiration date. When the deadline approaches, the part is silently removed and eventually replaced by a new one with similar characteristics. This dehumanizes the partners, turning them into temporary accessories for a lifestyle, rather than integral partners in a shared journey. Ultimately, the silent discard is the masterstroke of a manipulator who prioritizes his own emotional convenience over the well-being of the other. It is the opposite of love and respect, which would demand honest and empathetic communication, no matter how difficult. By choosing to disappear, the seducer asserts his control one last time, leaving behind a trail of confusion and pain that solidifies his power in the mind of the person he decided to leave behind, ensuring the impact of his presence lingers long after his absence. What is the psychological cost of being chosen, elevated to a fantasy world, and then silently discarded? The emotional legacy for the women who go through this cycle can be profound and lasting. They experience what can be called the trauma of the almost. They almost had the fairy tale. They almost secured a permanent place in that world. They almost were the one. This feeling of almost can be more damaging than a clear rejection from the start, as it generates a sense of personal failure and an endless search for what could have been. The cycle of idealization, devaluation, and discard is the hallmark of narcissistic abuse. The love-bombing phase creates a peak of euphoria and an intense bond. The subsequent phase of distancing and the final discard create a valley of despair. This emotional roller coaster is a form of intermittent reinforcement, one of the most powerful tools for creating psychological addiction. The brain becomes addicted to seeking the next high of affection, and the person can spend years trying to understand what happened and how to regain the approval that was suddenly withdrawn. The experience can lead to deep cognitive dissonance. The seducer's public image as a good, talented, and conscientious man comes into direct conflict with the private experience of being treated as disposable. To resolve this conflict, the victim often internalizes the blame. It's easier to believe there's something wrong with me than to accept the painful truth that the admired idol may be emotionally unavailable, manipulative, or simply incapable of maintaining a mature relationship. This can shatter self-esteem and the ability to trust one's own judgment in future relationships. Furthermore, the return to normal life after having inhabited a world of extraordinary privilege can be shocking and depressing. The contrast between life in the gilded cage and everyday reality can make everything seem gray and lackluster, deepening the sense of loss. The person hasn't just lost a partner. She has lost a status, a lifestyle, and an identity that was intrinsically linked to him. Rebuilding a sense of self, independent of that grandiose and traumatic experience, is a long and arduous process. Therefore, the price of proximity to this type of seducer is high. It's not just about a broken heart, but a potential rewiring of the victim's psyche. She may develop anxiety, mistrust, and a distorted view of love and self-worth. The trauma of the almost serves as a dark reminder that relationships based on extreme power imbalances and emotional manipulation tactics rarely end without leaving deep scars, even if the outside world only sees the fleeting glow of having touched fame. Analyzing the patterns of a seducer, like Leonardo DiCaprio, is not ultimately for judgment, but for learning. His persona and romantic patterns offer a fascinating case study on the subtle forms of power, control, and manipulation that can exist in relationships, especially where there are great imbalances. The most important lesson we can draw is the need to develop a keen radar for these dynamics in order to protect ourselves. Recognizing the tactics is the first step to neutralizing them in our own lives. The first lesson is to be wary of excessive intensity at the beginning. Love bombing, with its soulmate promises and overwhelming adoration, should be seen as a warning sign, not as the ultimate proof of love. True, healthy love grows over time, based on consistency, trust, and mutual knowledge, not on explosion of affection designed to overwhelm and addict. One must learn to value slowness and stability over a feverish intensity, which often masks hidden intentions of control. The second lesson is the importance of maintaining one's own identity and support network. Never allow a relationship, no matter how exciting, to isolate you from your friends, your family, your hobbies, and your career. These are your anchors, the voices that will remind you of who you are if you start to get lost in someone else's narrative. A healthy partner will encourage your connections and your independence, while a manipulator, subtly or openly, will try to make himself your entire world. Protect your autonomy at all costs. The third crucial lesson is to watch the patterns, not the words. People can say anything, but their patterns of behavior reveal their true intentions and character. A pattern of short relationships, abrupt endings, or a preference for partners in vulnerable positions is far more valuable information than any declaration of love. Trust the patterns, for they are the language of a person's unconscious truth, and a reliable indicator of how you will likely be treated in the future. Finally, this case study teaches us about the power of internal closure. In a world where ghosting and silent discards have become common, waiting for a manipulator to give us closure is a recipe for prolonged suffering. The lesson is to learn to give yourself closure by accepting the painful truth of the other person's behavior as the only answer needed. Understanding these tactics isn't about becoming cynical, but about becoming wise. It's about learning to choose partners who offer respect, equality, and consistency, the true pillars of a love that doesn't need a Hollywood script to be real. Seduction is a complex dance of power and desire, and the most charismatic figures are often the ones who have mastered the most dangerous steps. The story we've analyzed today is a reflection of patterns that are repeated far beyond Hollywood in our own lives. Being aware is your greatest power. If you've made it this far, it's because you seek the truth behind the facade. Join our community of critical thinkers. ***. Subscribe to The Truth, Dark Psychology. ***. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our deep dives, and leave your comment. Your perspective is vital to us. What truth do you want us to uncover next? Until next time.